Hi there. I wanted to make a recap or a postmortem of my Gamejam game that I worked on the last weekend for the Global Gamejam 2025. I was on the InnoGames Gamejam site, which is also my employer, and I worked on my own, alone, on this little game. I mean, I talked to the other people there about the game, so everyone contributed a little bit, you could say. But I did the programming and the graphics myself, and this is more or less the game. This is a little bit extended because I like the game so much that I decided to give it a little bit more love and care in the aftermath of the game jam. So this is the current version that you can play on my blog. This is just my local web server as a preview version. And the gameplay, I can quickly show you how it works. You are the friend of the little shrimpy here, and she gives you bubbles, and you can place the bubbles, and the bubbles will eventually merge. And if there are too many bubbles on the screen, they can't merge anymore, and eventually you will get the game into a state where you will lose, and then Shrimpy is very sad, and then you can play again and you get a high score, and there are settings to clear the data and to switch the sound on and off, and there's even a tutorial where this game is explained, at least a little bit. And that's it. Let's have a look on how this was being created, because I have this blocking system where I can embed my code, and I use this infrastructure to document the progress of how I got started and how it went over time. And I just want to show and recap what happened. And the topic of the game jam was bubbles, or just bubble. And this gave me quite a headache because I had no real good idea where to go, and I didn't like most of my ideas, but eventually I remembered that I've played last year this game here, Cosmic Collapse, and I liked it a lot, and I thought maybe this can be rethemed and maybe the game rules can be changed into something else. And normally at game jams I try to be super creative and try out concepts that just come out of my brain without any filtering. So this was a little bit new, that I take a game that exists, start off with it, and see what it becomes. And so I had some ideas what I wanted to do. I wanted to try out soft body physics for the bubbles. More or less, I didn't do. I can explain why. It wasn't necessary. So I started off with Hello World at that evening at around 8. And I then started out with trying to create a playfield with bubbles and see how this collision could be done. So I didn't use any kind of library here. No Box2D or Collider physics or whatever. I mean, this is Raylib. This is written in C. This is all the C code that is being used. So you can look up what the game could look like at these different points in time. And my biggest challenge in that evening was to get the collision response working right. And you can see this is more or less just gravity and spherical colliders or circular colliders working. And there is not much of a limit what I can spawn here. And I can also spawn it anywhere, but this is the, I would say, the foundation I needed. So these are these 200 lines of code for getting that running. And I continued until around midnight. And in the end, I had also the merging in. You see these very jumpy balls, they get reflected on the walls. And they currently have these numbers. And the first number before the colon is the size identifier, and after the colon, it's the time they need to merge. When these two bubbles here get in contact, or some other bubbles, you can see that the counter goes down, and when it reaches 0, then they merge. And that was the first day. I went home at that day, and on the next morning I started quite early on. So at 8 o'clock I was awake already, and I started thinking about the game rules and how to also graphically visualize it. And here I'm just drawing spheres, and the camera clipping plane is just cutting them off, so it looks like bubbles. I thought maybe I can use that also, but turns out it doesn't really work because the intersections are not working. I was trying to come up with a simple fashion way to show the intersections, because in principle, when you have spheres and you let them overlap, intersect, you get these bubble-like intersection patterns. So that is actually here also already in place. The spheres for the physical simulation are a little bit smaller than the sphere I'm drawing here. And I'm doing that because I want to have these intersection lines. And that also explains why spheres do not always get merged when they seem to be in proximity, but they have no contact. And this was brought up several times by people who played it. And I said, like, yeah, you need some pressure to apply, but it's just that the physics is not there yet. And then I had this idea, hey, why not just take a water line and the bubbles are floating up? And that was really easy to implement. That's just a different way on when to change the gravity. And that was looking already pretty nice, and I tested this quite a bit and came to the conclusion, yes, that can work. So there's this zone where it's above the water, and above the water the bubbles come down, and below the water they get pushed upwards. And yeah, that's working quite nicely. So I proceeded with coming up with ideas how to end the gameplay. So, and also to take a look on difficulties. So there are now different bubble colors, and only if the bubble color matches up, they will merge. And that makes it significantly more difficult. And a little bit later, I switched the rendering. So I fixed the camera. The spheres are no longer cut off, and I draw them as spheres. As I explained earlier, they have a bit of an overlap. And I'm drawing the spheres with slightly different colors. So the color values are off by 1 or 2 here. And the shader that I'm using on the render texture that I'm drawing this on is then detecting the edges. And I'm drawing and rendering the edges as white. And that is how I get these nice little bubbly intersections. Because, as I said, when you have two spheres and they overlap, you get these patterns. And I create the model I'm drawing there in a fashion that it has a high resolution on the plane you're looking at, but a very low resolution in the depth. And that has a very interesting effect that is just the result of the geometry, because if you have perfect spheres and you let them intersect, you get flat intersections. But if you take two cones and let them intersect, you get some fancy looking curved ones. So you see that when the bubbles are having an intersection point here, they do not have this flat intersection. And I think that looks very bubbly like, and I was very happy with that. And I didn't need any soft body physics. It was just draw the spheres a little bit bigger and have a very low resolution in one dimension of the sphere. And that was it. And that was 4 o'clock. And I decided, okay, it's time to establish the game loop. So I have just some buttons where you can play the game. Here the gameplay is, easy mode. You have only one single color. I dropped that because I found it's too easy. And what you can see maybe on the video, it could be a little bit difficult to recognize, but the colors are more distinct here. That was not because I thought like, oh, this looks nicer. I had some problems on my phone, on my mobile phone. A lot of times the intersections were not recognized by the shader. It turned out it was a precision. It was configured to be a medium precision, and switching it to high precision fixed that. And I proceeded with that, I implemented also high scores. So I'm using the browser's local store to save the high scores. So the local storage, which can be found very far to the bottom of the text here. Here it is. It is very, very simple and straightforward to interface with JavaScript. So what I did here is I have a storage struct in C, and I wrote some helpers to save and load based on smaller helpers, which is here I'm retrieving an uint32. And first I retrieve the data, which is just a key. And the retrieval of the data looks like this. This is just JavaScript. I think I could have used something else to integrate it, but here's the JavaScript code that is then converting from local storage a result into the into a string that is allocated on the heap. And that is all the interfacing I needed to store the data in the browser version of this game. So that went quite smooth. And then I started thinking of a tutorial, and pretty much already working. Well, not entirely. So I called it again a day. I talked quite long that night with other participants of the game jam. So I was only home at 2 o'clock. But for a game jam, that is still a very healthy time. And on the next day, I started drawing this. So in the morning, I came up with this little shrimpy, and she's your friendly avatar, or not avatar, but the character who's talking to you. Because if you're starting the tutorial, she explains to you that it's a very boring fish tank. So she has come up with this game, and here she helps you a little bit to merge the balls because they need to be connected. She pushes them together, and that's it. That's the gameplay here on the tutorial. The tutorial is actually pretty simple as well. I mean, in total, in the end, I can show you that the code is a little bit more than 1,300 lines of code, and the tutorial looks like that. I have a function, and this is just a counter, a relative counter, and I have these functions that I call with the step that this call is about, and these functions just take the step that I provided and compare it with the current step that the player is in, and if it doesn't match, it doesn't do anything. So that's all about it, and that means that the tutorial, that's the tutorial here. It's a one single function that is being iterated, and if I'm currently at that step, it draws whatever is given here and ignores the rest. And this is a very, very straightforward and extremely solid way of handling that. I'm a little bit proud to say that this game is pretty much bug-free. So I had not a single case where where a tester came and said like, hey, this is broken and I had to fix it. I had these cases of saying like, why do the bubbles not merge? But that was the gameplay. It was not technically a bug. And there were cases where, yeah, there are some problems with Raylib, especially, or not with Raylib, but with the web integration of Raylib on web browsers. And this can be a little bit difficult to sort out. But in the end, the game looked like that. I added these little bubbles here so that the main menu looks interesting. Has the settings menu where I can clear the data in case I want to test something. I have added different facial expression for her. They're just 4 different ones, and they are just copy pasted, and I drew over the eyes and so on. I had no artist. I just had to use my time wisely. And there was a little bit of time where I could add some expression when stuff happens, like when the bubbles get close to the red lines and they are about to pop, or when there is a number of combos, like when several bubbles pop without spawning a new bubble, she's happy. But if I come into the situation that a bubble is outside and I spawn a new bubble, she's gonna look anxious. And yeah, that was easy to add. I wished there were some ways how to animate her a little bit, that she's like has an idle animation and stuff like that, but I wouldn't have had the time to come up with that myself if not for an artist. And then the problem would have been that in Raylab this is not so easy to integrate. Like there's no complex or sophisticated animation system. I think the best bet would have been to use Blender and create a classic animation in Blender, 3D animation, and render it there. I think that would have worked as well. And then the day after, I was writing up a little bit about how it went. So there's a bit of retrospective. And on the projects page, you can see that, yeah, there the game is a little bit improved. I made fixes about the full screen play mode with the aspect ratios. I had as to make sure that she always fits, so she's very small here. But there's also the bubble here that is going to spawn next. And yeah, very, very few changes that I did over the couple of next days. And yeah, I'm thinking about improving this a little bit more. Maybe I'm gonna use this also as a test bed for seeing how I can deploy a game on Android using Raylab. That would be fun as well, if it works. And otherwise, I'm a little bit behind my schedule. Tomorrow is another day for my tower defense tutorial that I need to still update. It is already quite far, but I have to make sure that the descriptions are all, yeah, easy to understand and follow the explanations. But you can see that I had a little bit of fun with how the tower is acting when I'm building it. And I think, yeah, I overdid it a little bit again. That's quite a long update and there's quite a bit of math, but that's what I do. Anyway, thank you for listening to that point here. That was the Game Jam 2025, the global Game Jam. Maybe if I'm lucky, I can participate in another one this year, but let's see how that goes. Until then, see you around.